Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Carchidi from Philly Hockey Now, and welcome to our sixth episode, our Six Flyers podcast. And I want to thank two of our listeners, viewers to our Broad Street Bullcast for contributing. They've done a great job. And Shawn O at Philly 7M20, he gave us our Broad Street Bullcast name. And I want to add graphic artist Dan Dobbins. He created the logo we're using moving forward. And he's a great graphic artist. If you need any help in that area, go to @DobbinsBro. So thank you guys. We're here for you. We're here for our viewers, our listeners. If you have any suggestions on how we can make our podcast better, please email me, text me, and down the road we hope to have some guests. Maybe Lou Nolan, maybe Danny Briere, maybe some other people, maybe some players, but that's for down the road. But any other suggestions you might have, we're trying to be as interactive as possible, and we want to make the experience good for you because without you, this podcast would not work. I want to ask you a favor. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can also listen to us and find us on Spotify, and we hope to be on Apple Podcasts very soon. My crack producer, also named Sam Carchidi, is working on that as we speak. And without further ado, we're going to jump into this week's show. It's a slow time right now, where development camp, of course, just ended, and we're waiting for rookie camp in September, and then the real training camp starts right after that, and then the season gets underway in mid-October. So the dog days of summer are here, but we're still talking hockey. And not a lot of big news during the week, but still some news. The highlight of the week was that for the Flyers anyway, they re-signed 3 restricted free agents. Morgan Frost was probably the biggest name. Of course, he has a great chance to be the third center for the Flyers this year. They also signed Isaac Ratcliffe, another RFA, and they signed Tanner Laczynski, who has a lot of versatility. He can play either wing, he can play center. But as I said, Morgan Frost is the key out of those 3. He's favored to win the third line center spot. Laczynski is in the hunt. He could either be a 3C or a 4C. I would say Isaac Ratcliffe right now is a long shot to make the team. When they signed Nick Deslauriers, that probably put him back in the Phantom. So Ratcliffe is probably going to start the year at least with the Phantoms. But I want to talk a little bit more about Morgan Frost, though, because he played, believe it or not, 55 games for the Flyers. It didn't seem like he played that many last year, but he did. More than got his feet wet. He's no longer a rookie. And he even admits this is a prove-it year for him. And it is. But, a lot of people are a little down on Morgan Frost, but I think you have to be patient with him, much like the Flyers are patient with Shawn Couture. Morgan Frost is just 23 years old. He dominated junior. He scored over 100 points twice while he's in junior. And the OHL had 109 points in just 58 games in 18-19. Came up right after that, played for the Phantoms, had 13 goals in 42 games, and was a big contributor for the Phantoms. He has not had as much success, of course, in the NHL. He has just 7 goals, 16 assists in 77 games. That's spread out over 3, maybe even 4 years, a game here or a game there. But 7 goals in 77 games, you say, isn't going to cut it, and it won't. But the kid is still young. He's got lots of promise. He's just improving and learning the defensive game. And will this be a breakout year? Probably not. But will it be an improved year? I think if you get 11, 12 goals from Morgan Frost this year, you'd be satisfied and you get solid defense. But remember, Shawn Couture, who was bigger and stronger than Morgan Frost, was in a similar position. He played in the Q, had 2 96-point seasons, and was not very productive offensively with the Flyers. He was a great defensive player for several years, but really never broke through in the NHL on offense. And how he handled Evgeny Malkin with the Penguins and others. He was assigned to the top some of the top players around the league. And but it took him a while. When he was 23, same age as Morgan Frost, he had just 11 goals in 63 games. 2 years later, he convinced the Flyers he needed to be moved up in the lineup. He's more than a defensive player, and he exploded. He had 31 goals that year, and he was 25 years old. So my point is, Morgan Frost is only 23. Be very patient with him. Morgan Frost can develop, and hopefully he will develop with the Flyers. Hopefully they don't trade him too soon, and he develops with another team. So, keep the faith with Morgan Frost. This is a big year for him, and I think Morgan Frost is going to show that he belongs in the NHL. Another interesting tidbit with the Flyers this week. Tuesday, McKean's Hockey, and I love McKean's Hockey. They do a great job. They have people scouting the junior players and college players all over North America, and tip of the cap to Brock Otten. He's their scouting director, and he does just a tremendous job. But anyway, this week they came out with the preliminary top 16 for the 2023 draft. Why is that important to the Flyers? Well, if you look at it on paper right now, and I looked at it pretty closely, I think there's 8 teams. We'll call them the late 8 because they're going to be late to the playoffs more than likely. So those late 8 teams are going to be in contention for one of the 3 generational players. Brock Otten, the scouting director, says there are 3 generational players. You're usually fortunate if you have one generational player. A generational player, of course, is like a Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't say Claude Giroux is a generational player, but he's close. And Connor McDavid, of course, generational player. There aren't that many, but this one draft has 3 of them, according to McKean's. And the Flyers have a decent chance to get one of them. Of course, a lot depends on how they and the other teams play. A lot depends in the draft lottery. But let's just talk very quickly the 3 in order by McKean's. First one's not a surprise. You all know him. Center Connor Bedard has dominated the WHL in the last couple years. He's still a young kid, and he should go number 1 by all accounts. But center, Adam Fantilli is not far behind, USHL player. He is committed to the University of Michigan. Interestingly, McKean compares him to Alexander Barkov and also to Anze Kopitar. If he turns out to be as good as those players, whoever gets him is going to be thrilled. And again, the Flyers should be in the running for him. The third player is a right winger from Russia's KHL, Matvey Mishkov, and he's a small guy. He's going to get bigger and just has so much creativity on the ice. Think of Artemi Panarin, and he is also called a generational player. Now, with him, there's a caveat, of course. Who knows what the political situation will be with Russia at this time next year, next June, when the draft is held. Will that knock him down? If Russia is still in the same situation as we're in now, that could push him down in the draft. But again, it's very unusual to get one generational player. I don't think we have one in this 2022 draft. In the 2023 draft, you're going to have Connor Bedard, a center, Adam Fantilli, center, right winger Matvey Mishkov, and some of these guys are a little on the small side, especially Bedard and Mishkov, but Fantilli has some good size to him. But these guys are still growing into their bodies, but they have all the creativity you need. And keep that in mind for next year. I know it's a year away, just about 11 months now, but these guys are already on the Flyers' radar and some of the other teams. To me, the 8 teams that are going to be in contention for one of these 3 guys, and I guess Arizona would be one without a doubt, Montreal without a doubt, the Flyers are certainly in there, Chicago, Buffalo, Seattle, and 2 West Coast teams, San Jose, which is named Quinn as its coach, and Anaheim. So, keep that in mind as the season progresses, because those are the 8 teams that right now on paper look like they'll be in the battle for one of these generational players, great players, and they could help turn the Flyers around. One of them could help turn the Flyers around, along with some of the other draft picks that they've selected in the last few years. We'll be back after a short break with the mailbag. We got some great questions again, and stay tuned, and thank you for joining us. Hello, and welcome back to our Broad Street Bullcast. I'm Sam Carchidi with Philly Hockey Now, and we're going to one of my favorite parts of our podcast, our mailbag, and I want to thank everybody. You guys asked great questions. We got a ton of them again today. Unfortunately, can't get to all of them, but really do appreciate the show is all about you. And first question comes from Professor Martin Van Baylor. He asked, with the Ivan Fedotov situation, does Philly go for a veteran backup goalie again, or ride with the guy from the Phantoms? Of course, the guy from the Phantoms is Felix Sandstrom, and he had a very good year with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms last year, and he was going to battle Fedotov for the number 2 spot behind Carter Hart. For those who don't know, Fedotov starred in the KHL last year, and he's a real comer, 25 years old, ready to make his mark, I think, in North America. Unfortunately, he cannot get out of Russia. He's in the Navy now, in the Russian Navy, and as a result, Felix Sandstrom now is the favorite to win the backup spot. There will be a couple other guys in the competition. I think he will be given the chance to win the job, but if he falters and there's still some guys out there, let's just say he does not have a good exhibition season. Right now, there's still some veterans out there, Corey Schneider and Andrew Hammond, guys like that. But right now, I think that job is probably Felix Sandstrom's to lose, and he looked impressive in his few games of the Flyers last year. He's not a kid. He's 25 years old. He's actually older than Carter Hart. And, he's got a pretty good resume. So I think right now they're kind of committed to him. And the only way he doesn't make the team is if he really falters dramatically in the exhibition season. Second question comes from Mike Evangelista. He says, am I crazy for feeling okay about this year and going forward? I think the Johnny Gaudreau contract would have handcuffed us. Maybe if he's 24, I go for him. He says, I'm also excited to see what the kids will do and what Tony DeAngelo will do, and about the Tortorella factor. Of course, Torts is the new coach, his first year with the Flyers. He also says, we'll be better than people think, surely better than last year. Well, Mike, not to bust your bubble, it's almost impossible for them not to be better than last year. Of course, they had 61 points, second worst record in franchise history. But I think that this year they almost have to be better with Coots back. Maybe not full strength right away, but eventually he will be at full strength. I think Kevin Hayes will be at full strength. He played a lot in the last 6-7 weeks of the season last year. Coots, of course, is coming back from the back surgery, and it may take him a little bit longer, but they're going to be better. There's no question. Ryan Ellis, of course, is the key. Can Ryan Ellis play meaningful minutes? When will he be back? Will he be back in late October? Maybe in November, December? We don't know. That's the big question. That's the key to the season. I hear you about Johnny Gaudreau and his contract, but I would rather have signed Johnny Gaudreau at $9.7 a year than 2 average defensemen, Tony DeAngelo and Rasmus Ristolainen. Those 2 have a cap hit over $10 million, so that would have paid and more for Johnny Gaudreau. They're just average defensemen. I will say that DeAngelo, I'm excited to see him on the power play. He brings some offense from the blue line, and he will help quarterback the power play. But still, the bottom line is I would have gone for Gaudreau, even though that price is a little steep. So as far as the season, I see them right now as maybe a 70 to 75 point team. They had 61, as I mentioned, last year. Of course, if Ellis plays a majority of the games, they will have more points than that. But right now, we just don't know. about Ryan Ellis, and Chuck Fletcher says he doesn't know. So, I think that is going to play out as we get closer to training camp. But even if Ryan Ellis is 100% and early in the year, this team at best, I think, is a contender for the 8th playoff spot and will not be a contender for the Stanley Cup unless a miracle happens. As far as the kids, I'm really excited to see the kids. I agree with you. Morgan Frost, 23 years old. Wade Allison, Owen Tippett, Tanner Lazinski. We mentioned a couple of those guys earlier. It's going to be fun to see those guys because this is a really key year for them in their development. And they want to show their NHL players they deserve to not only stay here, but they can be, important players and help this Flyers team make a turnaround. It's not going to happen overnight, but if guys like this continue to progress, the Flyers will at least be, on the right page. Also excited to see Cam York. York, hasn't played a full year in the NHL yet, and looks like he'll be the third pairing left defenseman. And, I think he's ready. What we saw last year, he played, 25, 30 games, and he counted for himself well. Unfortunately, we mentioned in the previous question, Ivan Fedotov, he was going to make his NHL debut with the Flyers this year. I think that was pretty obvious at some point this year, maybe even in the beginning of the year he would be here. But that looks like a very long shot right now that we'll see him at all this year. That's disappointing because to me, he was probably the rookie I was most excited to see for the Flyers. He dominated the KHL, led his team to the KHL championship, and I really think he could have pushed Carter Hart, and I think that was much needed. But it looks like we're not going to see him this year, but that would have been a real plus, no question. Dune asks, and his handle is @Philly, what percent do you think we ever see Ryan Ellis play again? Dune, I'd say it's, the percentage is high. I don't know where you go, 90, 95% that he plays again. The big question is, will he be 100%? Will he be 100% effective? That's an unknown question. From talking to Chuck Fletcher, we're going to see him at some point this season, hopefully early in the season, hopefully in November. Fletcher made it seem like he did not even think he'd be here in the beginning of the season and be ready to play, but even that is not in stone. So, but I think we'll see him sometime this season, probably earlier in the season. My guess is maybe late November, but again, we'll know more about that as we get closer to training camp. Mike Bodine, @MB Flyer fan, says, was Bobby Brink a Flyer-approved prescribed workout? Was he on a Flyer-approved prescribed workout routine this summer when he tore up his hip? For those who didn't see the news a few days ago, Bobby Brink had hip surgery and, probably will not be back until late December, maybe early January. And, Mike, that's a really good question. I had 2 calls in to Brent Flair, who's the Flyers expert in the draft, also the Flyers assistant general manager, and he kind of oversees the minor league guys. And Brink was probably ticketed for the Phantoms at the start of the season. But I had 2 calls into Brent Flair, and he did not respond to either of them. So, that to me meant bad news. And, of course, a couple days later, the Flyers came out with the news that he underwent surgery. But I did want to ask Brent Flair, what kind of program was he on? Was it something the Flyers had approved? Didn't get a chance to do that, like I said, because he did not respond. And as you probably know, Flyers left winger Joel Farabee, one of the most promising players on this roster, also was injured doing a workout this summer, and he had neck surgery. So, Mike, I think those injuries have to be checked out, and this goes to Mike's second part of the question. He says, he follows up by saying the sheer amount of injuries may suggest that their philosophy needs to be looked at, and I agree. Why do you have 2 guys that were, 2 key guys Maybe Brink not this year. Maybe in the second half of the year he would have been here. But Joel Farabee is certainly a key guy and one of the most important players. Both of them get hurt in accidents in the summer, workout accidents, if you will. And yeah, I would like to know more about that because we've had so many injuries over the last couple years with the Flyers, and to have two players now hurt in summer workouts is kind of mind-boggling. The Flyers last year missed about 500 man games because of injuries, one of the highest rates in the NHL. So, that's got to be looked at, and as you know, Joel Farabee had the neck surgery, and we hope he can come back maybe in late October, early November. He had the same surgery that Jack Eichel had, and we'll know more about that again as we get closer to training camp. Next question comes from Chris C. And Chris asks, if the season goes to bleep, will they look at moving Hayes, JVR, and Coots at the deadline? I'd say yes on JVR. And again, this is the final year of his contract. His cap hit's about $7 million. And there's no question if the Flyers are out of it that he will be moved, or at least they will try to move him. He, of course, can help a team on the power play. Led the Flyers to 24 goals last year, although a lot of them were at the end of the year when it was basically garbage time for the Flyers. But JVR can still put the puck in the net, and I think if they're out of it as expected, he will definitely be moved. I don't think Coots and Hayes will be moved or dangled, but I wouldn't be surprised if Hayes is dangled. Again, it depends on the kind of year he's having. But you need some players that have that veteran leadership, even when you're rebuilding. That's why, if push came to shove and you said to me, do you think Hayes and Couture will be moved? I would say no. Better chance that Hayes does, but I don't think they will. I think you need some veterans. That's why I always for getting Johnny Gaudreau here, because you can build around a star like that, and you can also build around very good players like Shawn Couture and a good player like Kevin Hayes. So, and I doubt, we talked earlier about how the 2023 draft is going to be really stacked. So I doubt you're going to see teams giving up first-round picks, knowing that the 23 draft is going to be, really one of the best in recent history. Patrick Martin asks, what is the realistic time frame before management can put a strongly competitive team on the ice each night? He has 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. I say if it's done right, it would probably be 3 years, Patrick. And we can use this year's Colorado Avalanche as a great example. They had 48 points at the bottom of the pack in 2016-17. And 3 years later, they were on a 108-point pace. That season only was 70 games because of COVID, but they were 42, 20, and 8. So think of that. They went from, and let's just use that pace. So think of that. They went in 3 years from 48 points to 108 points. And then 2 years after that, this year, of course, they won the Stanley Cup. So, if it's done right, and Colorado did it right. They rebuilt, they used young players, they made the right draft picks, and they improved, if my math is correct here, by 60 points in 3 years. So it can be done that quickly. Another recent example is the New York Rangers. They had just 77 points in 2017-18, and you fast forward to this year, 4 years later, they had 110 points, and they were a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, and they will be a Stanley Cup contender next season. So, that's a good time frame. If you do it right, 3 years, 4 max, you can be a Stanley Cup contender. So, have some hope with the Flyers. They have some young guys they can build with, and there's going to be growing pains. There's no question about it. But watching a team build can be fun if it's done right. And but I want to thank everybody for watching or listening. I want to thank my great producer, my son Sam, who does an awesome job each week. And thank you, especially, though, for tuning in. And as the late, great Gene Hart was fond of saying, good night and good hockey.